It's February 3rd, 2026. The temperature in Kyiv has dropped to minus 20 degrees Celsius. Ukrainians are huddled in their freezing apartments, praying their power stays on. And that's when the air raid sirens begin to wail. What happens next will become the largest drone attack in modern warfare history, a calculated storm of 450. Kamikaze drones and 70 ballistic missiles unleashed in a single night. This is not just an attack. This is a message sent one day before peace talks. Putin just broke his promise to the President of the United States. Let's rewind 1 week. On January 29th, President Donald Trump personally called Vladimir Putin with a simple request. Stop bombing Kyiv's energy grid for 1 week while peace negotiations take shape. Putin agreed. The Kremlin confirmed it publicly. For a brief moment, it seemed like diplomacy might have a chance. But here's what was really happening behind the scenes.
While Trump thought he had secured a humanitarian pause.
Russian factories at the Alabuga Special Economic Zone in Tatarstan, over 1,300 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, were working 24-hour shifts. They were mass-producing Geran-2 drones. Russia's domestically manufactured version of Iran's Shat-136 kamikaze drone. These weren't ordinary drones. Each Geran-2 weighs 200 kilograms, carries a 50-90-kilogram warhead packed with high explosives or thermobaric charges, and can fly up to 2,000 kilometers. At 180 kilometers per hour for 12 hours straight. They cost between $30,000 and $80,000 per unit, cheap enough to launch in the hundreds. And Russia had been stockpiling them for this exact moment. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy later said it plainly. The Russian army took advantage of the American proposal to pause the strikes, not to support diplomacy, but simply to stockpile missiles and wait for the coldest days of the year. Putin didn't honor the ceasefire. He weaponized it. At 11 p.m. local time on February 2nd, radar stations across Ukraine began detecting something terrifying. Wave after wave of unidentified aerial contacts moving west from Russian-controlled territory. Not 10, not 50. 450 long-range drones. Accompanying them were 70 ballistic and cruise missiles, Iskander, Kinzel, hypersonics, Kalibor cruise missiles, and Kh-22s launched from Tu-22 bombers over the Black Sea. The Ukrainian Air Force scrambled every available asset. F-16 Fighting Falcons armed with a Haim-120 AMRAAM missiles took off from secret air bases. Patriot missile batteries across Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Odessa locked onto incoming threats. Iris-D and NASAMS systems activated. Mobile Gepard anti-aircraft guns moved into position to intercept low-flying drones. Every air defense commander in Ukraine knew what this was. An overwhelming swarm attack designed to saturate and exhaust their missile stockpiles. Ukrainian Air Force spokesperson Yuri Init explained the nightmare scenario his pilots faced. We could only shoot down 38 of the 71 missiles because a very high proportion of them were ballistic. Ballistic missiles fly too fast and too high for most systems. The Kinzel hypersonic missile, for instance, travels at speeds up to 16,000 kilometers per hour, nearly 13 times the speed of sound. Even a Patriot PAC-3 interceptor, one of the most advanced air defense missiles in the world, has only seconds to react. But it was the drones that created the real chaos. By 1 a.m., the skies over Ukraine looked like something out of a science fiction nightmare. Geran-2 drones painted black for nighttime stealth operations came in low and slow. Their distinctive delta wings and rear-mounted propellers giving them a haunting silhouette against the winter clouds. Ukrainian air defenders call them mopeds because of the loud buzzing sound their engines make. But there's nothing funny about what they do. Here's how Russia's drone swarm doctrine works. Each Geran-2 is pre-programmed with GPS coordinates, power substations, thermal plants, electrical transformers. They fly autonomously using Russia's GLONASS satellite navigation system, which makes them nearly impossible to jam electronically. But Russia's engineers have gone further. By 2026, many Geran-2 South were equipped with Starlink satellite communication systems. Yes, Elon Musk's Starlink allowing Russian operators to change a drone's target mid-flight, even over Ukrainian territory. Some drones even carried rear-facing cameras and anti-tank mines under their wings to defend themselves against Ukrainian interceptor drones. The strategy is brutal in its simplicity. Launch so many drones that Ukrainian air defenses run out of missiles. A single Patriot PAC-3 interceptor costs $4 million. A Geron-2 drone costs $50,000. Do the math. Russia can afford to lose 80 drones for every one air defense missile Ukraine fires. And that's exactly what Putin is betting on. Ukrainian forces managed to shoot down or suppress 412 of the 450 drones. That's a 91.5% interception rate, an incredible achievement under the circumstances. But here's the problem. Even 38 drones getting through is catastrophic when they retargeting critical infrastructure. At 3 a.m., the first explosions began ripping through Ukrainian cities. 27 missiles and 31 drones struck targets across 27 locations in 5 regions: Kharkiv, Odessa, Zaporizhia, and Vinnytsia. The primary targets were energy infrastructure. Russia hit the Kharkivska substation with 7 Tornadoes missiles. The Losivska substation took 4 more direct hits. The Kyiv substation was destroyed. Power plants across the country went dark. Within minutes, 1,170 apartment buildings in Kyiv lost heating. Remember, it's minus 20 degrees Celsius outside. People were freezing in their own homes. Emergency crews scrambled to restore power, but the damage was extensive. One substation connected the Rivian nuclear power plant to Kyiv and central Ukraine that went offline too. The entire electrical grid was teetering on the edge of collapse. But energy wasn't the only target. Russia also struck residential buildings. In Kyiv, 5 people were wounded when drones hit apartment blocks, a kindergarten, and a gas station. Fires erupted across the capital. In Zaporizhia, 2 18-year-olds were killed walking down the street when a drone exploded nearby. In the Dnipro region, a Russian drone struck a bus carrying miners to work, killing 12 men. And then there was the psychological warfare. Russia deliberately targeted the Hall of Fame at the National Museum of the History of Ukraine in World War II, the museum that sits at the foot of the Motherland Monument in Kyiv, sacred site commemorating Ukraine's fight against Nazi aggression. Ukrainian Culture Minister Tatiana Berezhna called it symbolic. And cynical, the aggressor state strikes a place of memory about the fight against aggression in the 20th century, repeating crimes in the 21st. When the sun rose over Kyiv on February 3rd, the scale of the devastation became clear. President Zelenskyy addressed the nation, his voice filled with barely controlled fury. Taking advantage of the coldest days of winter to terrorize people is more important to Russia than diplomacy. And here's the kicker. This attack happened just 24 hours before Ukraine. Russia and the United States were scheduled to meet for peace talks in Abu Dhabi. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte was literally in Kyiv that morning, standing next to Zelenskyy at a memorial for fallen Ukrainian soldiers. When the full extent of the attack was still being assessed, Rutte told the Ukrainian parliament that NATO allies had provided 75% of all missiles supplied to Ukraine since last summer, and 90% of all air defense missiles. But he also admitted the truth. I know that more is urgently needed. The Trump administration was furious. Here's why this was such a catastrophic diplomatic failure for Russia. Trump had personally vouched for Putin's word. He told his cabinet on January 29th. I personally asked President Putin not to fire into Kyiv in various towns for a week, and he agreed to do that. 4 days later, Putin had made Trump look like a fool on the world stage. There's one thing Donald Trump doesn't tolerate, it's being played. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha summed it up perfectly. Putin waited for the temperatures to drop and stockpiled drones and missiles to continue. His genocidal attacks against the Ukrainian people, Ukraine didn't just sit there and take it. On the night of February 5th, Ukrainian forces launched their own massive counterstrike. They fired long-range drones at a drone training and production facility in occupied Zaporizhia, hit a concentration of Russian forces in the Belgorod border region, and destroyed an electronic warfare site in occupied Donetsk. The message was clear. You hit us, we hit you back. But Ukraine also ramped up its air defense game. Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky announced the deployment of hundreds of specialized drone hunting teams equipped with their own first-person view drones to intercept Russian Gerons mid-flight. These small air defense units operate in the first and second echelons of interception. Basically, they're the last line of defense if a drone makes it past the big missile systems. Ukraine also began electronically disabling Russian Starlink terminals that Russia was mounting on their drones, cutting off their ability to communicate mid-flight. But perhaps the most significant development came from Poland. On the night of February 3rd, as Russian drones flooded Ukrainian airspace, NATO fighter jets from Poland, Germany, and the Netherlands were scrambled to high alert. The Polish armed forces confirmed that German Eurofighters and Dutch anti-air defense systems were put on standby, ready to respond if even one Russian drone crossed into NATO territory. Poland's operational command explicitly stated, no violation of the nation's airspace was recorded. Translation: Russia came right up to the line but didn't cross it, because they know what happens if they do. Let's zoom out and understand what this attack really means. This wasn't just about destroying power plants. This was about sending a message at the negotiating table. Russia wanted to show Ukraine and the United States that it still has the military capability to inflict unbearable pain on Ukrainian civilians. It was a negotiating tactic wrapped in a war crime. But here's what Putin didn't count on. The attack completely backfired diplomatically. Instead of weakening Ukraine's position at the peace talks, it strengthened international resolve to support Kyiv. Denmark and Sweden immediately announced a $290 million package to supply Ukraine with Trident air defense systems, self-propelled 40mm anti-aircraft guns designed specifically to counter drones and cruise missiles. Ukrainian Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal warned that Russia had struck energy infrastructure 217 times since the start of the year, and that more blackouts were coming. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Western allies doubled down on long-term commitments. In 2026 alone, Ukraine is set to receive JAS-39 Gripen fighters from Sweden, Saab 340 airborne early warning aircraft, 8 next-generation SAMP TNG air defense systems from France, and thousands of extended-range attack munitions long-range. Cruise missiles capable of hitting targets 400 kilometers deep inside Russia. The U.S. just conducted a successful live-fire test of the IRAM system at Eglin Air Force Base on January 21st. Ukraine will receive 3,550 of these missiles for $850 million, funded by Denmark, the Netherlands, and Norway. Russia may have launched 450 drones in one night, but Ukraine is building an air defense network that will make attacks like this exponentially more costly in the future. Let's talk facts. Since Russia's full-scale invasion began in February 2022, Ukraine has faced relentless attacks on its civilian infrastructure. But the February 3rd attack was the largest single-night drone and missile barrage of 2026 and one of the largest of the entire war. Russia launched a record 32 ballistic missiles in this attack alone, according to Ukrainian officials. The total munitions count for 150 drones plus 70 missiles exceeded 500 weapons in a single night. Ukraine's Air Force has become incredibly efficient at shooting down Russian drones. In January 2026 alone, Ukrainian air defenses intercepted nearly 22,000 targets. That's a success rate hovering around 90%. But here's the problem. Even a 10% failure rate is devastating when Russia is launching attacks on this scale. If 450 drones are fired and 38 get through, that's 38 warheads hitting hospitals, schools, power plants, and apartment buildings, and the human cost is staggering. At least 10 people were wounded in the February 3rd attack, with 2 teenagers killed in Zaporizhia and 12 minors killed in Dnipro days earlier. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians spent the coldest week of the year without heat or electricity. This is total war against a civilian population. So why is Russia doing this? Simple. Putin believes he can break Ukraine's will to fight by making life unbearable for ordinary Ukrainians. This is a strategy of exhaustion. If people are cold, hungry, and living in darkness, eventually they'll pressure their government to accept whatever peace deal is on the table, no matter how bad the terms. But Putin has miscalculated. Every attack like this hardens Ukrainian resolve. Every dead miner, every freezing child, every bombed-out power station becomes another reason Ukraine will never surrender. And it strengthens the argument in Western capitals that Ukraine must be given the weapons it needs to win, not just to survive. Here's the bottom line. The February 3rd attack was the largest drone assault of 2026. It caused massive damage to Ukraine's energy grid and killed innocent civilians. But it also exposed Russia's strategic weakness. They're running out of ways to win this war, so they're resorting to terror. And terror doesn't win wars. just makes your enemies more determined to destroy you. So here's the question we have to ask. Trump gave Putin a chance to prove he could be trusted. Putin used that chance to stockpile drones and launch the biggest attack of the year. The peace talks in Abu Dhabi went ahead anyway on February 4th and 5th. Both sides called the negotiations constructive. But no breakthrough was reached. The sticking points remain. Who controls the occupied territories in Donbass? What security guarantees will Ukraine receive? And who controls the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant? Meanwhile, Russia is already preparing for the next massive attack. Ukrainian intelligence reports that Russia's Alabuga factory is producing 310 drones per month. With a goal of 6,000 drones by summer 2025, Ukraine is racing to build more air defense systems, train more pilots, and deploy more interceptor drones. But the reality is this: as long as Putin believes he can bomb Ukraine into submission, these attacks will continue. The February 3rd attack wasn't just the biggest drone assault of the year. It was a test. A test of Ukraine's defenses. A test of Western resolve. And a test of whether Putin will face any real consequences for breaking his word to the President of the United States. So far, the only consequence has been more weapons flowing to Ukraine. What do you think happens next? Will Russia keep launching massive drone swarms, hoping to overwhelm Ukrainian defenses? Or will Ukraine's new air defense systems and long-range missiles change the game? Will Trump keep pushing for peace talks, or will this betrayal force the U.S. to take a harder line against Putin? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to stay updated on the latest military developments in Ukraine, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because this war is far from over, and the next attack could come any night.